Okay, in section 4.5 we are going to look at isosceles and equilateral triangles. An isosceles triangle is a triangle with legs of equal length. The third side is the base. The angles at the base are called the base angles, and the third angle is the vertex angle. And you can see in our figure below we have triangle ABC. So our legs are AB and CB. Our base is AC. Our base angles are angle A and angle C, and our vertex angle is angle B. The isosceles triangle theorem says if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then the angles opposite those sides are congruent. So we can say if AC is congruent to BC, then angle A is congruent to angle B. The converse of the isosceles triangle theorem says if two angles of a triangle are congruent, then the sides opposite the angles are congruent. So if angle A is congruent to angle B, then side AC is congruent to side BC. And the isosceles triangle bisector theorem says the bisector of the vertex angle of an isosceles triangle is the perpendicular bisector of the base. So CD is perpendicular to AB, and CD bisects AB. So in our figure, we see that angle ACD is congruent to angle BCD. So that means that at angle D, we have right angles. We have two corollaries to look at. First one says if a triangle is equilateral, then it is equiangular. So in other words, if all three sides of a triangle are congruent, then all three of their angles are congruent. And the second one says if a triangle is equiangular, then the triangle is equilateral. So if all three angles are congruent, then all three sides are congruent. And if you recall from the last chapter, these would be known as regular triangles. Okay, in example 1, we want to explain why each statement is true. In letter A, it says angle WVS is congruent to angle S. So we are looking at this triangle down here. We see that side WV is congruent to side WS. So that means that our two angles must be congruent because of the isosceles triangle theorem. If the two sides are congruent, then the two angles opposite those sides are congruent. So since WV is congruent to WS, so that makes angle WVS congruent to angle S by the isosceles triangle theorem. Okay. In letter B, we're going to be looking at sides TR and TS. So side TR and TS are on our big triangle. We see angle R and angle WVS are congruent. So angle R is congruent to angle WVS, and angle WVS is congruent to angle S. We just saw that in letter A. So that means that angle R will be congruent to angle S by our transitive property. And then if our two base angles are congruent, then the sides opposite those angles are going to be congruent. So therefore, TR is congruent to TS by the converse of the isosceles triangle theorem. Okay, and we are done with number 1. Okay, number 2, we want to find the value of y. So in our triangle, we see that side ML is congruent to side MN. So if angle L is 63 degrees, then angle N will be 63 degrees. Because if the sides are congruent, then their opposite angles are congruent. We also notice that angle LMO and angle NMO, so the angles up here, are congruent, which tells me that line MO must be a perpendicular bisector by our theorem. So that means we have 90-degree angles at angle O. So to find angle Y, I can take 180 minus 90 minus 63, and I get that Y is 27 degrees. Okay, number 3, we want to find the values of X and Y. Well, we see that we have two isosceles triangles. So if I look just at the triangle on the left, I see I have one angle that's 50 degrees, so that means this angle is also 50 degrees. So to find X, I can take 180 minus 50 minus 50, and I get that X is 80 degrees. Now our triangle on the right, we have another isosceles triangle. So if my angle here is Y, this angle here is Y. So to find how many degrees angle Y is, I can say, well, 2Y plus 100 has to equal 180. Those three angles are going to add up to 180 degrees. And we saw that last chapter when we looked at triangles. So I subtract 100 and get 2Y equals 80. So that means Y is 40 degrees. Okay, in number 4, we want to find the values of X and Y. And we see we have an isosceles triangle in number 4. So if my two sides are congruent, then my two base angles are going to be congruent. So if this angle is Y, then this angle is also Y. Those two are congruent. You notice 110 and Y are supplementary angles. So to find Y, I can take 180 minus 110, and we get that Y is 70 degrees. So my two base angles are 70, and my three angles in a triangle add up to 180. So I can say that X plus 70 will equal 180. So X plus 140 equals 180. So that makes X, oops, let's back up a little there. So it makes X 40 degrees. Okay, same idea in 5. We're looking to find the values of X and Y. So we see that we have an isosceles triangle. So if we want, we can mark this side will be 52 degrees, that angle. I also notice that my vertex angles are congruent, which means my line is a perpendicular bisector. So I have a 90-degree angle at my base. So to find X, remember those three angles will add up to 180 degrees. I can take 180 minus 52 minus 90, and I get that X is 38 degrees. Now, if my line is a perpendicular bisector, not only is it cutting my vertex angle into two congruent parts, it's also cutting the base into two congruent parts. So that means Y will be 4. Okay, number 6, we want to find the values of X and Y. So I'm going to start with the top triangle on the right to find the value of X. Well, I see that I have an isosceles triangle. So if my one angle is 60 degrees, my other base angle will be 60 degrees. And if you recall, the three angles will add up to 180. So to find X, we can take 180 minus 60 minus 60, and we get that X is also 60 degrees. So we actually have an equilateral triangle there. Then with my triangle that has Y, I see that these two angles are supplementary. So to get the missing angle, if I take 180 minus 60 I get 120. So I know that that angle up top, so the vertex of my triangle on the left, is 120 degrees. My sides are congruent, so that tells me if my one base angle is y, the other one's y. So I can add up my angles in the triangle, so 2y plus 120, and set it equal to 180. So I get 2y equals 60, or y is 30 degrees. Okay, number 7. Find the values of x and y. We are told that ABCDE is a regular pentagon. So that tells me all my sides are congruent and all my angles are congruent. So I'm going to mark my figure. Alright, well first I want to find out how many degrees each of those angles are in the pentagon. So remember from last chapter, take number of sides minus 2 and then divide by the number of sides to get each angle. When you do that, you get 108 degrees. So that means angle D is 108, angle C is 108, angle B is 108, angle A 108, and angle E 108. If you look, you see that angle Y is in triangle EDA. It's isosceles. So if the one angle's Y, so is this one. I know that angle E is 108. So I can say an equation, I can write an equation, 2y plus 108 equals 180. Our three angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. Then solve for y. And we get that y equals 36 degrees. Well, going back to our figure, we found that angle y was 36 degrees, so then that makes this angle up here also 36 degrees, because our triangles DEA and DCB are congruent triangles. Now x is part of angle D, which is 108 degrees total. So to find x, take 108 and subtract the two angles you know. So minus 36 minus 36, we get that x is also 36 degrees. Alright, let's look at our last example in this section. So again, in number 8, we want to find the values of x and y. If you notice, we have an equilateral triangle because all three of my sides are congruent. So we know that all three of these angles are congruent, and if a triangle is equilateral, it is also equiangular, which means all three of my angles will be 60 degrees. If you don't remember that, you can always take 180 divided by 3, you get 60 degrees. Because remember, equilateral triangles are regular polygons. Alright, so to find angle x, well, we see that it's in the smaller isosceles triangle, so this angle is also x, and we know that part of the whole triangle, well, we know the whole angle is 60 degrees and part of it's 30. So to get angle x, just take 60 minus 30, and we get that x is 30 degrees. Then to find angle y, well, I know my two angles here are 30 and 30. So to get y, take 180 minus 30 minus 30. So angle y is 120 degrees.